All right, so in the classroom example, we have this waterfall here. Go ahead and open that up. You should get something that looks like this. Click here, it should already be textured as well. And see that we are set up for cycles. Rendering. If it's taking too long, you can switch to EV. And then you'll have something a little bit quicker and you'll be able to see the texture. It's pretty much the same texture across the whole thing. We're going to have like a waterfall coming down here. All right, just like we did with our fire, I'm going to hit Shift A, go to Mesh, and make a cube. And I'm going to hit S to scale this up. This is just going to be our domain. I'm going to hit G and then Z to move this up, and then S and then X, and just scale that in, just so that it encompasses that area where the where that water is going to come down, so that we have a space. Go ahead and rename this cube domain. Now go ahead and press N, and you'll notice that we have some scale here issues. We want this all to be a value of 1, which means that this is the original scale size. This can cause issues with our simulation if these values are off. So just go ahead and go to Object, Apply, and then just do Scale, and that should zero all this out. You can also do Object, Apply, and then Location, then that'll totally clean everything out. This will be the initial starting point. All right, now we're going to head over to the Physics panel and select Fluid. So let's go to Physics panel here, select Fluid, and for type, let's go ahead and select Domain. And you can see here that our scale is set to 32 for resolution, and that's roughly the size of our liquid there. So for domain type, we don't want to do gas, we want to do liquid. All right, so liquid simulations tend to take a long time to bake and can be pretty computational. If you have a slower computer, I recommend only setting resolution divisions to 32. I'm going to crank mine up to 96. You can see that took it down there because I have a little bit more powerful of a computer. If you can render your assignment overnight, then I would do it that way. All right, so for time scale here, let's set this to 0.5. The reason for that is normally fluid simulations tend to look very fast, so setting this value lower will slow down the simulation, making it look a bit more realistic. All right, so let's go to border collisions. Currently, all sides of the domain have collisions. This means fluid builds up and eventually fills the entire domain. And you can see that by seeing how all of these are checked off. Instead, what we want is the fluid to disappear when it reaches the bottom. Let's uncheck bottom and front. And that way the fluid doesn't hit these sides, but just really disappears as it goes down. All right, so down, look for liquid settings. I'm going to expand this out a little bit here. Now we want to set bandwidth, narrow bandwidth to 8 here. This will increase the number of particles in the simulation, giving us a better result. And we also want to enable fractional obstacles. This will make sure the fluid doesn't stick to any effector object, which is going to be essentially this whole area here. Now we want to add foam particles. Scroll down until you see this particles tab. So go ahead and check on that. And what we want to do is we want to look for foam. So check that on here. We don't need like spray or bubble particles. So I found that only using foam works best for this simulation. So you can see here's bubble, all this other stuff. So let's set both our potential and particle update radius to 3. So here's our potential radius. We're going to set that to 3, and then particle update radius to 3. This will help smooth out the particle grids, giving us a better result. Sometimes particles will flicker around, and setting this value higher helps prevent that. All right, now let's set wave crest particle sampling to 300. This will give us more particles in the crest wave. Here, let's go ahead and go over here to a little bit of our viewport shading. Go ahead and check on mesh here. What this will do is it'll create a small mesh around each liquid particle. So let's set the particle radius, or just keep the particle radius at 2. This will make the mesh look a bit blobby and not very realistic, so maybe we could bring it down to 1.2 actually. Now we want to use motion blur, so go ahead and turn on use speed vectors here. I'm going to bring this up a little bit here and make sure you're on timeline. All right, so the last thing we need to do is go down to, I call it cache. I'm from the United States. They say cache in other countries, but go ahead and open that up. And we want to set the type here to all, and that's modular and replay. And we want to check is resumable, just in case we need to stop the bake at any point. Now, another thing we need to do is change this from OpenVDP to Unicache. And the reason for that is this speed vectors thing, which does the motion blur, only works with Unicache. And that's pretty much it for our domain. Go ahead and hit Control S to save that. Next thing we need to do is create our flow object where the water is going to come out of, and adjust the effectors so that like when things bump into it. All right, so I'm going to hit Shift A here. I'm going to go to Mesh Plane, and I'm going to hit G and then Z to move it up. And then I'm going to hit R. This is for rotate. I'm going to type in, I'm going to hit R and then X and then 90, and that'll rotate it 90 degrees. And then I'm going to hit S and then Z and just scale that down. And I'm going to hit G. I'm just really just placing this here. And then S and then X and scale that out a little bit like that. All right, I'm going to hit Shift A here, same as before, or sorry, Control A here. I want to reset location, Control A again. I want to reset scale, and I'm going to reset rotation. So that freezes all this stuff out for this guy. All right, let's head over to our physics tab here. And what we want to do is we want to select fluid. And then for the type here, we want to do flow. And let's see. Geometry, we want to do inflow, because inflow, what that'll do is it'll keep the water from going. Or I'm sorry, keep the water going. If we do geometry, it kind of creates this geometric blob stuff. Inflow just keeps a never-ending stream of water to come out. Now for flow type, we want to choose liquid. Now because this object is a plane, open up flow source here, and we want to make sure that we check on is planar. This tells Blender to treat this inflow as an unclosed mesh, meaning it will emit fluid even though it doesn't have any real thickness to it. And next we want to enable initial velocity here. We want the fluid to move in the direction of the waterfall. In this case it's minus Y, because this is positive Y going in this direction, this would be negative Y. So you can see down here we have this minus Y direction here. So just set the initial value inside there to -1. Alright, so the next thing we need to do is add an effector. So go ahead and select all three of these. That's the two rocks on the side. We want to do fluid, and then for type here, effector. And you can see collision is on there. Go ahead and use effector. Now the thing here is this didn't actually apply it to everything. So see if I select this type landscape, it applied it there. But if I go down here, it did not apply it. And if I select this plane here, it did not. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the top one that has it on here, the fluid, hold Control, select the next landscape in this plane, and then inside of here I'm going to hit Control and L, and I'm going to select link, I think it's link object, or link transfer data. Let's see. Oh, actually, you know what? I'm going to do copy modifiers. And that should... Actually, it didn't work that way. Let me try one more time. So this one has the modifier. So I think we select all the way up to the last one. Then we hit Control L, and then we do copy modifier. There we go. Now they all have that effector modifier on there. All right, with that done, go ahead and select your domain. And then down at the bottom, let's look for this section for cache, and let's hit bake all. Now I'm going to actually hit escape for a second, and I'm going to change this to maybe 150 frames. I think 250 might be too long. And I'm going to hit resume, and I'm going to pause the video and let that just work its way through. Okay, something that I missed is make sure to select this middle part here and have it check is planar, because it is essentially a plane. And then here is my my plane here. And so you can see here that as it goes down there, and it starts to kind of, you can't really see it because we don't have the render really, but we have a little bit of a, and it's just kind of falling down the sides here. And I actually had to go in because it was taking quite a while on my end, on my domain, and I had to set it to 32 here. But you can see how it's deleting here once it hits the bottom of my domain, because we had unchecked the front and bottom. All right, now we got to set up our foam particles. At the moment, the particles are just these like little halos here, which mean they're just points in three-dimensional space, and they won't show up in the render. Another thing is our domain object here is really jagged, so I'm going to right click and I'm going to turn on shade smooth to smooth out that water. Next, we're going to use a cone object, and that cone object is going to represent these bubbles. So I'm going to shift A here, go to mesh and cone, but make sure not to click off of it. And then we're just going to set the vertices to 3. We're going to keep it very, very low. And also set its radius to 0.02 to make it super tiny. Do 0.02 here. You know what? Let's leave that at 1. Yeah, let me do that one more time. So mesh, cone. We'll set this to 3. Set this radius 1 to 1, and then this to 0. And then let's just set its XYZ scale to 0.2. Or 0.02 rather. Yeah, that's pretty tiny. And then I'll hit G. I'm just going to move this off to the side for a second. Now we're ready to assign this cone to as an object to our particles. So let's go ahead and select our domain. And go ahead and free up your free all here. And then we want to go to our particles systems panel here. So let's see here. Now we want to go to here, our particle system. There we go. We have liquid and we have foam. Go ahead and select foam here. And under render here, do render as, and then what we want to select is object. And then for the object, we want to go ahead and you can click on this, or you can click in here and select cone. Now each of the objects will be that cone that we added a couple steps back, like when we created that guide. So let's go back down here, and then I'm just going to rebake everything out. Let's go ahead and select our domain, and let's make a water material. So go over here to materials here, click new, and I'm just going to name this water. Right, and under here, go ahead and change it to glass BDSF. And for the color, let's choose I don't know, like a slight blue. Maybe something like this. Let's just try, let's see, let's do hex. I'm going to play with some values for a moment. I chose this value. I mean, you can go with any light blue. I'm going to actually go back and shade smooth this again. For roughness, I want this to be 0. And let's see, index of refraction here. Let's try 1.3. Index of reflection is like how fast light will pass through our object. The higher the value, the slower the light will pass through. And then down here in volume, let's go ahead and do principled volume. And for color, same thing, give it a little bit of a blue here. Let's change density to maybe 0.5.